Let's begin in the dark. The kind of profound, wet darkness that exists only in the middle of an ocean, hours before the sun has even considered its return. The date is April 7th, 1945. And if you're listening closely, beneath the whisper of the wind over the waves, you can hear a sound. A deep, rhythmic, almost organic thrumming. It's the sound of a giant's heart beating. This giant is the Yamato. 72,000 tons of imperial pride, forged steel, and righteous fury. The largest, most powerful battleship ever to sail the seas. Her main guns, 9 of them, are the size of industrial smokestacks, capable of hurling a shell the weight of a small car over 26 miles. She is, on paper, the unqualified queen of the ocean. A floating fortress that represents the very soul of the Japanese Empire. Imagine you are Ensign Mitsuru Yoshida, a young radar officer, standing on her bridge. The air is cold, thick with salt spray and the faint, metallic tang of fuel oil. You can feel the vibration of the ship's 4 colossal turbines not in your ears, but in the bones of your feet, in the marrow of your spine. It's a feeling of immense, unstoppable power. But tonight, that feeling is a lie. Around you, the other officers are silent specters, their faces lit only by the faint, ghostly green glow of the instrument panels. No one speaks of it, but everyone feels it. This isn't a sortie. It's a funeral procession. Yesterday, before leaving port, the crew was assembled. The ship's sacred battle flag was raised. The emperor's portrait was honored. And then came the sake. 1,000 tiny cups, passed to every sailor. It was a toast not to victory, but to a glorious death. The mission, Operation Tengo, is a fantasy born of desperation. The Yamato and her small escort, a light cruiser and 8 destroyers, are to sail to Okinawa, crash through the American fleet, beach themselves on the shore, and fight to the last man as an unsinkable gun emplacement. They have been given just enough fuel for a one-way trip. Now, as the fleet cuts through the East China Sea, Yoshida and every other man on that bridge is grappling with a terrifying, almost surreal contradiction. They are the apex predator of the sea, yet they feel like sacrificial lambs. And the reason hangs in the empty sky above them. Look up. There is nothing but clouds and stars. There are no friendly aircraft. No Zero fighters flying combat air patrol to protect them from what is inevitably coming. For a battleship in 1945, having no air cover is like a knight going into battle without a helmet, without a shield, without a prayer. It's a violation of the most fundamental law of modern naval warfare. The plan, so poetic in the halls of the Imperial General Headquarters in Tokyo, feels like madness out here on the cold, black water. They are a magnificent target, sailing in perfect formation, utterly blind and totally exposed. How could the greatest battleship in history, the pride of a nation, sail directly into a perfectly laid trap with no eyes to see it coming? But they are not alone. Far beneath the waves, in the crushing black silence of the deep, something else is alive. 2 American submarines, the USS Threadfin and the USS Hackleback, are on patrol. They are the unseen tripwires of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Inside the cramped, stale air of the Threadfin's control room, a sonar man leans forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. He holds his headphones tight against his ears, filtering out the groans of his own vessel. And then he hears it, faint at first, a rhythmic, patterned sound that doesn't belong to the ocean. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. The sound of heavy screws, turning fast. More than one set. A lot more. He scribbles a note and passes it to his officer. A shadow has just entered their world. The hunt has begun. The submarine reports ripple upward through the chain of command, moving from the cramped radio shacks of the fleet to the nerve center of the entire Pacific operation, the flagship of Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Imagine the scene aboard the heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis. It's a world away from the desperate fatalism of the Yamato's bridge. Here, there is a quiet, confident hum of immense, organized power. Men move with purpose through compartments filled with the glow of radar scopes and the endless chatter of teletype machines. This is the brain of the largest naval force ever assembled, and Spruance is its presiding intellect. He is not a man of fire and brimstone, he is a creature of cold, brilliant logic. A grandmaster of the ocean's chessboard. When the reports of a Japanese surface fleet, a large one, come in, his mind immediately goes to the tools he understands best: his own battleships. 6 of them, including veterans like the Tennessee and West Virginia, raised from the mud of Pearl Harbor and thirsty for revenge. The official explanation, the one dictated by a century of naval doctrine, is immediate and clear. If the enemy sends out his queen, you meet it with your own. This is where the plan on paper begins to form, a masterpiece of classical naval strategy. Spruance orders Task Force 54, his battle line, to prepare for a surface engagement. Think of it like a duel from an older, more honorable age. 2 lines of steel behemoths steaming toward each other, ready to trade salvos at 20 miles. It's a contest of gunnery, armor, and nerve. A brutal, bloody arithmetic that Spruance has mastered. His plan is to intercept the Yamato's force and annihilate it in a decisive, climactic gunfight. On paper, it is a sound, logical, and even beautiful plan. It is the kind of engagement that naval officers dream of their entire careers. But this is 1945, and the old gods of war are dying. That reality has a name: Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher. He commands Task Force 58, the fast carrier group. Mitcher is the opposite of Spruance. He's a gnarled, weathered old airman, a carrier admiral to his core. He doesn't think in terms of battle lines and armor thicknesses. He thinks in terms of flight decks, bomb loads, and attack waves. When he hears about the Yamato, he doesn't see a worthy opponent for a gunfight. He sees the single greatest target his pilots have ever been offered. To him, using battleships to sink the Yamato is like using a sledgehammer to kill a fly when you have a can of poison spray right in your hand. It's inefficient, it's risky, and it misunderstands the very nature of modern war. Here, in the tension between these 2 admirals, is the core of the investigation. The official story is Spruance's plan for a surface duel. The contradiction is Mitcher's unwavering belief that his aircraft can, and should, do the job alone. As dawn breaks on April 7th, the contradiction is given wings. A Martin Mariner flying boat, a lumbering scout plane, lifts off from its tender. For hours, it schemes the low clouds over the East China Sea, its crew scanning the gray, empty water. The minutes stretch into an agony of suspense. And then, a break in the clouds. The observer shouts. The radio operator's fingers fly across his Morse key. A message, sharp and electric, slices through the static on the bridges of the Indianapolis and Mitcher's flagship, the Bunker Hill. Contact. 1 battleship, Yamato class. 1 light cruiser. 8 destroyers. Course 210. Speed 12 knots. No air cover. I repeat, no air cover. That last sentence changes everything. It's the piece of hard evidence, the irrefutable clue that shatters the logic of the old world. A super battleship, alone, naked under an open sky. Spruance's beautiful plan for a gun duel doesn't just look outdated, it now looks like a dangerous and unnecessary risk. The system's attempt to fit the anomaly into the familiar box of a surface engagement has just been proven fatally naive. On the flag bridge of the Bunker Hill, Mark Mitcher reads the dispatch, and a thin, predatory smile touches his lips. The debate is over. The chessboard is about to be swept clean. The message from the Mariner scout plane doesn't just report a contact, it delivers a verdict. No air cover. Those 3 words are a death sentence, and everyone in 5th Fleet Command knows it. The mystery of why the Yamato is sailing isn't the immediate problem anymore. The problem is what it represents: a 72,000-ton dagger aimed directly at the soft, vulnerable underbelly of the entire Okinawa invasion. Let's use a war college briefing to understand the stakes. Imagine the American invasion of Okinawa is like building a massive, intricate bridge of ships, stretching all the way from the fleet's supply bases to the beaches. On one end, you have the carriers and battleships, the combat power. On the other end, you have the Marines and soldiers fighting and dying on the island. But the bridge itself, the long, fragile span connecting them, is made of hundreds of unarmored, slow-moving ships, troop transports, ammunition ships, hospital ships, oil tankers. These are the logistical lifeblood of the invasion. They are packed shoulder to shoulder in the anchorage at Hagushi Bay, and they are, for all intents and purposes, utterly defenseless against a battleship's main guns. The Yamato doesn't have to win a fair fight. It doesn't even have to survive. It just has to get 1 good hour among those transport ships. 1 hour of firing its monstrous 18.1-inch guns into that dense thicket of floating warehouses and barracks. The result would be an apocalypse. It wouldn't just be a tactical loss, it would be a strategic catastrophe. The entire invasion force on Okinawa could be starved of ammunition, food, and reinforcements within a day. It would be a blow so devastating, so humiliating, that it could potentially change the political will in Washington to continue the war. This isn't just about sinking a ship, it's about protecting the foundation of the entire Pacific campaign. The clock is ticking, and it's ticking loudly. On his flagship, Admiral Spruance does the math. At its current speed, the Yamato will reach the Okinawa anchorage by nightfall. His own battleships, Task Force 54, are powerful, but they are also relatively slow. To intercept the Japanese force in time for a classic gun battle, he would have to pull them away from their critical shore bombardment duties, sail them out to meet the enemy, and engage in a chaotic, high-stakes brawl potentially in the dark, where torpedo-armed Japanese destroyers would have a deadly advantage. It's a gamble, a huge one. And if he fails, if Yamato slips past him in the night, the price will be paid in the flames of the transport fleet. This is the moment the official plan crumbles under the weight of reality. The clean, elegant logic of a battleship-on-battleship duel is too slow, too risky. The ticking clock has made it obsolete. Aboard the carrier Bunker Hill, Admiral Mitcher feels the urgency, like a physical pressure. He knows that his aircraft are the only weapon system in the entire U.S. Navy that possess the two things that matter now: speed and reach. His carriers are floating over 100 miles away from the Yamato, but for his pilots, that distance can be closed in a little over an hour. They are the perfect tool for this exact crisis. They can strike fast, strike hard, and eliminate the threat long before it ever gets close to Okinawa. He sends a blunt, almost demanding message to Spruance. Will you take them, or shall I? The message hangs in the air between the two flagships. It's more than a question, it's a challenge. It's the new way of war demanding its turn. Spruance, the brilliant pragmatist, looks at the map. He sees the slow-moving icons of his battleships and the terrible, unforgiving timeline. He sees the dagger of the Yamato pointed at his heart. He makes the only choice he can. The reply comes back, a single, decisive phrase that seals the fate of the world's greatest battleship. You take them. The order galvanizes Task Force 58. It's like a current of electricity surging through the fleet. On the flight decks of 11 aircraft carriers, ships with names that would become legend like Essex, Hornet, Bunker Hill, and Yorktown, the quiet tension of waiting explodes into a symphony of controlled chaos. Men in colored jerseys, yellow for plane directors, blue for handlers, red for ordnancemen, swarm across the steel decks. The air fills with the whine of hydraulic lifts raising planes from the hangar bays below, the clatter of bomb carts, and the piercing shouts of officers coordinating the launch. This is the industrial might of America, condensed onto a few acres of floating steel, preparing to unleash hell. The plan of attack is a masterpiece of combined arms doctrine, naval aviation style. This won't be a single, simple bombing run. It will be a complex, multi-layered assault designed to systematically dismantle a fortress. First, the F-6F Hellcat fighters. Their job is suppression. They are the scalpel, tasked with slicing away the Yamato's protective screen of anti-aircraft fire. Armed with rockets and .50 caliber machine guns, their mission is to strafe the decks, kill the gunners, shatter the fire control directors, and sow chaos. They are there to blind and deafen the giant before the Real killers arrive. Then come the SB-2C Helldivers, the heavy hammers of the fleet. Each one carries a 1,000-pound armor-piercing bomb. Their job is brutal and direct: to punch through the Yamato's thick deck armor and cripple her from the inside, to detonate in her engine rooms, to turn her topside structure into a twisted junkyard of burning steel. They are aiming for the ship's brain and nervous system. Finally, there are the TBM Avengers, the true ship killers. They are slow, vulnerable, and carry the most devastating weapon in the naval arsenal, the Mark 13 aerial torpedo. Each one is a 2,000-pound submersible missile packed with 600 pounds of torpex, an explosive 50% more powerful than TNT. Their job is the most dangerous and the most critical. They have to fly low and slow, directly into the teeth of the enemy's guns, to drop their deadly fish into the water. They are aiming for her heart and her lungs, to tear open her hull below the waterline where the damage is irreparable. As the first wave of nearly 400 aircraft thunders off the pitching decks, there's a palpable sense of historic purpose. For these young pilots, many of them barely out of their teens, this is the moment they have trained for. The Yamato has been a ghost, a legend whispered about in ready rooms across the Pacific. Now, she is real, she is located, and she is naked. The intelligence is clear, the target is defined, and the weapon is unleashed. There is a feeling of cold, clean certainty. The mystery of the strange sortie seems solved. It was a suicidal act of desperation, and they are here to deliver the inevitable conclusion. The plan is perfect. The sky is full of American planes. The outcome feels preordained. The first wave arrives over the target just after midday. The sky is a mess of low, bruised clouds and intermittent rain. Below them, through a break in the weather, they see it. The Yamato. She isn't a ship, she's a geographical feature. A moving island of steel, carving a brilliant white wake through the gray water, her escorts arrayed around her like pilot fish. For a moment, the pilots are simply awestruck. But only for a moment. The Hellcats peel off first, screaming down towards the Japanese fleet. But the Yamato is not a passive target. This is where the simple, optimistic theory of the attack collides with the genius and the sheer, terrifying desperation of the enemy. Suddenly, the sky erupts. The Yamato reveals a secret weapon, something American intelligence had heard rumors of but never witnessed on this scale. It's called Sanshikudan, the Type 3 incendiary shrapnel shell. The ship's colossal 18.1-inch main guns are turned into the world's largest shotguns. Each massive shell is packed with thousands of steel pellets and incendiary tubes, timed to explode in a gigantic cone of fire and metal directly in the path of the attacking planes. The effect is apocalyptic. The sky, one moment gray and empty, is now filled with immense, blossoming clouds of black, red, and purple smoke, laced with a storm of lethal shrapnel. It's like flying through a fireworks display designed by the devil himself. The American pilots are stunned. They are flying into a wall of flak, so dense it seems you could walk on it. Over 150 anti-aircraft guns of various calibers join the fray, creating a hemisphere of death around the fleet. The promising lead, the undefended target, has just revealed itself to be a hornet's nest. The Helldiver pilots push their planes over, plunging down through the maelstrom. They are met with a storm of tracers, green, red, and orange, reaching up for them like claws. They release their bombs, aiming for the pagoda-like superstructure, and pull out of their dives so hard that many pilots black out for a few seconds. Some bombs hit, tearing into the ship's upper works, starting fires, and shredding gun mounts. Down low, at wavetop height, the Avenger torpedo pilots begin their agonizingly slow, straight runs. This is where the enemy's cunning becomes most apparent. The Japanese destroyers surge forward, sacrificing themselves to shield their queen. At the same time, the Yamato's captain, Kosaku Ariga, performs a masterful display of seamanship. He turns the 72,000-ton behemoth as if it were a speedboat, combing the torpedo tracks, presenting his heavily armored bow to the attackers, making his ship the smallest possible target. The first wave pulls away, their ammunition spent, their fuel low. The pilots are shaken. They have scored hits, yes. The Yamato is trailing smoke. But she is not crippled. Her speed is only slightly reduced. Her guns are still firing. The giant is wounded, but it is very much alive, and it is enraged. The simple theory of a quick, clean kill has just been shattered against the brutal reality of a determined, brilliantly handled, and unexpectedly ferocious defense. Back on the carriers, the atmosphere is thick with tension. The pilots of the first wave land their battered planes, fuselages riddled with holes the size of a man's fist. Their debriefings are a chaotic torrent of information, painting a picture of a target far more lethal than anyone had anticipated. They speak of the purple smoke, the flaming walls of shrapnel, the sheer, unbelievable volume of fire. The myth of the easy kill is dead. Just as the commanders on the bunker hill are trying to process this new, more dangerous picture, a breakthrough comes from a completely unexpected source. It's a simple observation, buried in the flood of pilot reports, from an anonymous Avenger torpedo bomber crew. Most pilots had attacked from the side, aiming for the ship's broadside, the largest possible target. It was logical, what the manuals taught, but against a ship as brilliantly maneuvered as the Yamato, it had proven only marginally effective. But this one crew, perhaps forced off their intended path by the flak, had done something different. They had approached from the bow, but instead of dropping their torpedo to hit the armored nose, they had flown past the ship and dropped their torpedo from the other side, so it would circle back and strike the stern. Their report noted something crucial while the rest of the ship zigged and zagged wildly. The stern, the place where the rudders are, seemed to swing in a wider, more predictable arc. It's a tiny detail, but a sharp-eyed intelligence officer on Mitcher's staff spots it. He connects it with another piece of seemingly unrelated data. The first wave had managed to score a single torpedo hit on the Yamato's port side, near the fantail. It was this hit, not the bombs, that had caused the ship's slight reduction in speed. Suddenly, a new path forward is revealed. It's a shift in thinking as fundamental as it is brilliant. Forget the superstructure. Forget the deck armor. Forget trying to sink this monster with 1,000 cuts from above. The key isn't to kill the giant by bludgeoning its head. The key is to cripple it by breaking its legs. You don't have to sink a 72,000-ton battleship if you can turn it into a helpless, drifting hulk. The new target isn't the ship's massive hull. It's her Achilles heel, her rudders, and her propellers. This changes the entire calculus of the attack. It requires the torpedo bomber pilots to aim for the smallest parts of the ship, the stern and the bow, while ignoring the massive, tempting target of the midship section. It also requires them to attack from multiple directions at once, a tactic called a hammer and anvil strike, to confuse the ship's captain and prevent him from turning to face a single threat. The order goes out to the ready rooms for the second wave. The new doctrine is preached with desperate urgency: go for the bow and the stern. Cripple her. We don't care if you sink her, just make her stop. The pilots, chalking the new attack vectors on their blackboards, understand immediately. This is no longer a simple bombing mission. It's a focused, deliberate act of naval surgery, to be performed at 200 miles per hour in a hurricane of steel. The second wave of nearly 200 aircraft screams towards the wounded Japanese fleet. The mood is different now. The eager optimism of the first launch has been replaced by a cold, professional fury. These pilots have heard the reports. They know about the walls of flak, the masterful maneuvering, the sheer violence of the target. They are on a mission of demolition, armed with a new and beautifully simple objective: break its legs. They execute the hammer and anvil tactic with vicious precision. Avenger squadrons split their formations, approaching the Yamato from both the port and starboard sides simultaneously, a pincer movement in the sky. On the bridge of the battleship, Captain Ariga is now faced with an impossible choice. He can turn to port to comb the tracks of one set of incoming torpedoes, but in doing so, he exposes his ship's full broadside to the attackers on the starboard. He is a master of this deadly chess game, but his opponent now has too many pieces on the board. He is trapped. The torpedoes strike home. Not one or two, but a coordinated series of devastating impacts. The pilots following the new doctrine focus their attack relentlessly on the port side. One torpedo hits, then another, a third. Each impact is a colossal underwater explosion, a body blow that sends a shudder through the entire 72,000-ton frame of the ship. Through the smoke and spray, the American pilots can see the results. The giant is beginning to slow. A slight, almost graceful list to port begins to develop. The plan is working. The reports flash back to the fleet: multiple hits on port side. Target is listing. Repeat, target is listing and slowing. But then, as the attack continues, the pilots begin to witness something strange, something that doesn't make sense. The list to port is increasing, but it's happening too fast. Naval architects design battleships to have complex systems of counterflooding to correct just this kind of damage. A ship like the Yamato should be able to absorb this punishment and keep fighting for hours. Instead, she seems to be helping her killers. The list grows from a few degrees to 10, then 15, then 20. It's an angle that seems to defy the laws of physics. What the American pilots are now discovering, in the most brutal way imaginable, is the Yamato's terrible, uncomfortable truth. They are performing an autopsy at 200 knots, and they have just stumbled upon a catastrophic, congenital birth defect. The ship's designers, in an effort to save weight, had created a fatal flaw. The joint between the immense outer armor belt on the hull and the lower, anti-torpedo bulge was weak. When a torpedo struck that specific point, the force of the explosion wasn't just absorbed, it was channeled inward, rupturing the main hull and causing uncontrollable, cascading flooding in the outer engine and boiler rooms. The very armor meant to protect the ship was acting as a conduit for its own destruction. This is the whistleblower moment, broadcast over the fleet radio. The pilots are reporting a success so profound it seems like an exaggeration. They haven't just wounded the giant, they've triggered a fatal disease in its steel bones. The Yamato, the ultimate expression of Japanese naval power, the symbol of perfection and martial spirit, is, it turns out, a flawed titan. Its invincibility is a myth. The pilots came expecting to fight a god, but by following the new path, they have discovered that the god has a jaw made of glass. Aboard the flagship Bunker Hill, the atmosphere is electric but dangerously divided. The radio speakers crackle with the triumphant, breathless shouts of the pilots. She's going over. List is at 25 degrees, maybe 30. Her rudders are useless, she's circling. To the men in the sky, the battle is won. They are reporting a miracle. But on the flag bridge, Admiral Mitcher and his chief of staff, the legendary Arleigh 31-knot Burke, are not celebrating. They are the system. And the system is built on a foundation of professional pessimism. In war, optimism is a luxury that gets men killed. They've spent years fighting an enemy known for fanaticism, resilience, and deception. The institutional memory of the U.S. Navy is scarred by the painful lessons of underestimation. Imagine being a fire chief told that a raging inferno, which by all laws of physics should be consuming a skyscraper, has suddenly, inexplicably started to put itself out. Your first reaction isn't relief. It's suspicion. The reports from the pilots are simply too good to be true. A 72,000-ton super battleship capsizing after just 2 waves of attacks? It defies all logic, all precedent. It contradicts the reams of intelligence reports that have portrayed the Yamato as an indestructible sea monster. The system pushes back with a cold, brutal calculation of risk. Burke and Mitcher look at the map. They see the icon of the Yamato, still moving, however slowly. They see the unprotected transport ships at Okinawa. To believe the pilots and call off the attack would be a gamble. If they are wrong, if the Yamato somehow rights herself and limps towards Okinawa under the cover of darkness, the failure would be historic. It would be their failure. The reports of the ship's imminent demise are dismissed, not out of malice, but out of doctrine. They are categorized as unconfirmed and likely exaggerated due to combat stress. The pilots, who are witnessing the truth with their own eyes, are essentially being accused of hysteria. And so, the order is given. It is an order that embodies the system's disbelief. A third wave of over 100 aircraft, which had been held in reserve, is to be launched immediately. The directive sent to the strike commanders in the air is chilling in its simplicity: press attack. Target is still a viable threat. Confirm sinking. For the pilots of the second wave, now disengaging with their fuel gauges on empty, it's a baffling, almost insulting command. They have solved the puzzle and broken the monster's back. They are reporting its death, and the response from high command is, "We don't believe you. Go make sure." The internal conflict is no longer about how to sink the ship, it's about the yawning chasm between the ground truth witnessed by the men bleeding in the sky and the cold, detached skepticism of the men looking at maps 100 miles away. The system, in its cautious wisdom, is refusing to accept its own victory. The pilots of the third wave are launched into the gray afternoon sky, not on a mission of discovery or tactical brilliance, but on a grim errand of confirmation. They are being sent to kill something that is already dead. For the men still in the air over the target, the situation is even more surreal. They are flying protective circles at a safe distance, watching the death of a giant in slow motion. The Yamato is a pathetic, staggering wreck. She is listing at more than 35 degrees, her main deck nearly vertical, awash in the gray sea. Her massive rudders are jammed hard a port, forcing her into a slow, wide, uncontrollable circle. Most of her anti-aircraft guns are silent, their crews dead or unable to operate on the steeply angled decks. She is no longer a viable threat. She is a morgue, waiting for the ocean to claim it. The radio traffic captures the crushing injustice of the moment. The strike leader from the carrier Yorktown, watching the pathetic spectacle, transmits a message that is both a plea and a protest. She is already sunk. Recommend we go after the destroyers. It is a plea for sanity from the man on the scene. The response from Task Force 58 Command is immediate and inflexible negative. Your target is the battleship. Attack is ordered. Imagine being that pilot. You are being ordered to risk your life and the lives of the men following you, to pump more bombs and torpedoes into a sinking, defenseless ship. It feels less like an act of war and more like a desecration. It is the purest distillation of the battle between the plan on paper and the reality on the ground. The plan, now corrupted by disbelief, demands a body for confirmation, and it is willing to pay for it with the lives of its own men. The pilots obey. They push their planes over and begin their attack runs on the capsized hulk. The remaining flak, though sparse, is still deadly. A helldiver is hit and vanishes into the sea. An Avenger, its torpedo dropped, pulls up and is shredded by a final, desperate burst from a 25mm gun, cartwheeling into the waves. These men are the price of the system's doubt. They are casualties of the fog of war, sacrificed on the altar of certainty. The victory was total, but the system's doubt had demanded one final, bloody piece of proof. And the Yamato, even in its death throes, was about to provide it in the most catastrophic way imaginable. The final torpedoes of the third wave strike the dying ship. They are superfluous. The pilots pull away, grimly reporting their hits as ordered, and watch as the final act unfolds. The Yamato, now listing at an impossible 80 degrees, begins to slip beneath the waves, stern first. Her great bow, with the imperial chrysanthemum emblem, rises into the air. For a moment, she hangs there, a steel monolith pointing at the uncaring sky. The men who had fought her guns with suicidal courage are now just tiny figures clinging to a vertical mountain of steel or struggling in the churning, oil-slicked water. Of her 3,300 crewmen, fewer than 300 will survive. But the Yamato has one last act of defiance. Deep within her hull, the immense weight of her 18.1-inch shells, each weighing over 3,000 pounds, breaks free from the storage racks in her forward magazines. They tumble and crash into each other, a cataclysm of unsecured high explosives. The chain reaction is instantaneous. At 14:23 local time, the Yamato explodes. It is not an explosion, it is a geological event. It is the single largest man-made, non-nuclear explosion in history up to that point. A colossal fireball erupts from the sea, punching a column of smoke and fire 4 miles into the sky. It forms a perfect, terrifying mushroom cloud, a grim preview of a weapon that would be unleashed on Japan just 4 months later. The shockwave is felt by the American pilots over 100 miles away. On the Japanese island of Kyushu, more than 120 miles distant, civilians look south and see the dark flower blooming on the horizon. This is the catastrophic unfolding. This is the ultimate, undeniable confirmation that High Command had demanded. The pilots of the third wave, circling the pillar of smoke, radio it in with a somber finality that leaves no room for doubt. Target exploded. Detonation observed. She's gone. The dramatic irony is crushing. The men in the air, who knew the ship was finished long before, were forced to continue their attacks, losing men and machines to put an exclamation point on a sentence that was already written. Their ignored warnings now hang in the air, echoed by the deafening silence that follows the Titanic explosion. The losses of that final, needless wave of attacks were not the cost of sinking the Yamato, they were the cost of skepticism. The monster is dead, but its final act was to turn the weapon of its destruction back on its executioners, not with guns, but with the poison of doubt. Years pass. The war ends. The story of the Yamato settles into a simple, heroic narrative. American naval aviators, in a stunning display of power, overwhelmed and sank the world's mightiest battleship. The frustrating details, the ignored reports, the system's disbelief, the needless losses of the third wave are smoothed over, packed away into archives like old uniforms. The fog of war, it seems, has been replaced by the haze of memory. For decades, the full story remained an unsolved case. But 2 keys were needed to unlock the final, hidden chambers of this mystery. The first key was found filed away in a Washington archive, nearly half a century later. They were the original Japanese design specifications for the Yamato-class battleships. And they told a damning story. There, in a series of precise, technical drawings, was the flaw. The weak joint between the immense outer armor belt on the hull and the lower, anti-torpedo bulge. The official, vindicating proof of what those young pilots had discovered in the heat of battle. It wasn't a fluke. It was a quantifiable, catastrophic design error. The ship was born to die this way. The second key came from the mouths of the men who sent it to its doom. Post-war interrogations of captured Japanese naval officers, including the architects of Operation Tengo, finally answered the central question why. Why send the greatest battleship in the world on a one-way suicide run with no air cover? The answer was devastatingly simple and profoundly Japanese. It was never a military operation in the Western sense. It was a ritual. By April 1945, the Imperial Japanese Navy was a ghost, its carriers sunk, its air fleets annihilated. To the old guard traditionalists in the high command, allowing the Yamato, the very symbol of the Navy, to rust at anchor while the Army fought and died on Okinawa was an unbearable dishonor. The mission was not designed to succeed, it was designed to fail gloriously. It was a final, magnificent act of national seppuku, a gesture intended to preserve the honor of the Navy in death. They weren't trying to win a battle, they were trying to write the final, bloody verse of an epic poem. The declassified file is now complete. The blueprints vindicate the pilot's observations about the ship's physical weakness. The interrogation reports vindicate their initial intelligence assessment. The mission was, from its very inception, a suicidal charge. Every confusing piece of the puzzle, the lack of air cover, the one-way fuel load, the impossible objective suddenly snaps into perfect, tragic focus. The pilots whose reports were dismissed are officially, finally, proven right. The unbelievable truth they reported from the cockpit was, in fact, the absolute truth. The mushroom cloud that consumed the Yamato was a prophecy, written in smoke and fire over the East China Sea. Just 4 months later, similar clouds would bloom over 2 Japanese cities, heralding a new age where the battleship, the carrier, and every ship that sailed the seas would become instantly, terrifyingly obsolete. The story of the Yamato is not just the death of a ship, it is the death of an entire era of warfare. And it leaves us with a chilling question in our own modern battles, fought with drones and satellites. What ground truths are being reported by our soldiers that the system, in its cautious wisdom, refuses to believe?